For 10 years, Pharaoh Amenhotep has remained trapped in a deep slumber no one believes he'll ever wake from. In the meantime, his empire is ruled by ambitious hands, and the palace of Sutek has fallen into silence and decay. But when a young servant named Layla arrives at the palace, what begins as simple curiosity turns into a discovery that will change everyone's fate. Something about her presence disturbs the pharaoh's stillness, stirring the sands of time and shaking the foundations of an invisible spell. Unknowingly, Layla is drawn into a dangerous game of power, where the awakening of one man could mean the rebirth of an entire kingdom or its downfall. The great palace of Sutek stood like a sentinel against the desert sky, its limestone walls gleaming golden in the late afternoon sun. Inside those imposing walls, time had seemingly stood still for a decade. The royal chambers remained hushed, servants moving like ghosts through corridors where laughter once echoed freely. "Watch yourself, girl," hissed Nima, the head of palace servants, grabbing Layla's wrist as she nearly dropped a clay pitcher of water. "Do you have any idea what Vizier Kamet would do if you disturbed the silence? 10 years we've maintained perfect order, and I won't have some desert-born nobody ruin it all." Layla ducked her head, her thick black hair falling forward to hide the flash of defiance in her amber eyes. "I'm sorry, mistress, it won't happen again." At 20 summers, Layla was new to the palace of Sutek. The drought had driven her family from their small village to the capital, where her quick hands and quiet demeanor had earned her a coveted position within the palace walls. What she lacked in experience, she made up for in observance. And in the 3 moons since her arrival, she had observed much. "That's right, it won't," Nima said, releasing her with a small push. "Now take that water to the eastern chamber and be quick about it. Don't dawdle." The eastern chamber. The word sent a chill down Layla's spine despite the oppressive heat. Everyone knew who resided in the eastern chamber. Pharaoh Amenhotep, the god-king of Aruzen, had not risen from his golden bed in 10 years. Not dead, the priests insisted, but caught in a divine trance communing with the gods. The royal physicians attended him daily. Servants fed him honeyed water and thin gruel. His body remained perfect and unchanged, breathing so softly one had to watch closely to see the rise and fall of his chest. But his eyes never opened, his lips never spoke, and in his absence, Vizier Kamet ruled. "Well, are you waiting for the Nile to run backward?" Nima snapped. Layla hurried away, the water sloshing gently in the pitcher. The corridors narrowed as she approached the royal wing, the walls closing in like the throat of some great beast. Guards stood at attention, their eyes following her movement with suspicion and, was it her imagination? A hint of fear. "Water for the living god," she murmured, the ritual phrase falling from her lips. The guards exchanged glances but stepped aside. Even they wouldn't interfere with the sacred rituals that kept their pharaoh tethered to the mortal realm. The eastern chamber was surprisingly small and dimly lit by oil lamps that cast long, dancing shadows across walls covered in hieroglyphs. The air was thick with incense and something else, something Layla couldn't name, but that made the fine hairs on her arms stand on end. And there, upon a raised platform of obsidian, lay Pharaoh Amenhotep. Layla had glimpsed him once before, from a distance, but now, standing mere feet away, she found herself transfixed. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 30 summers when the sleep took him. His face was strong, with high cheekbones and a straight nose. His skin gleamed like polished copper in the lamplight, gold adorned his wrists and neck, and a simple linen kilt draped his lower body. He looked like he might open his eyes at any moment and ask why a servant girl was staring at him so boldly. "You may approach." The voice startled Layla. A small man in priest's robes sat in the shadows beside the bed. "The water, if you please." Layla stepped forward, her heart hammering against her ribs. As she leaned to pour the water into the waiting basin, her sleeve brushed against the pharaoh's exposed arm. A shock, like desert lightning, coursed through her. The pitcher slipped from her suddenly numb fingers and crashed to the floor. "Foolish girl!" The priest leapt to his feet, but Layla barely heard him, for in that moment, when her flesh had touched the pharaoh's, she'd felt movement, the slightest twitch of muscle beneath skin, and more, a presence awake and aware and desperately, terribly trapped. "I'm so sorry," she gasped, dropping to her knees to gather the broken pieces. "Leave it," the priest ordered. "Get out, now." Layla fled, but not before casting one last glance at the sleeping pharaoh, and there, in the flickering lamplight, she could have sworn she saw his eyelids flutter. That night, sleep eluded her. She tossed on her thin pallet in the servants' quarters, replaying the moment over and over. Had she imagined it? The movement, the sense of desperate awareness. "You touched him, didn't you?" The whispered words cut through the darkness. Layla sat up to find Moiraira, an older woman who worked in the scribe's chamber, sitting beside her pallet. It was an accident," Layla whispered back. Moiraira's weathered face crinkled with concern. "There are no accidents in the palace of Sutek, child. Not anymore. Not since Kamet took control." "What do you mean?" The older woman glanced around the dark room where other servants slumbered. "Not here. Meet me by the eastern granary before dawn. There are things you should know." Dawn was still a promise on the horizon when Layla slipped through the palace grounds to the granary. Moiraira was waiting, her slight form wrapped in a dark shawl despite the warm night. "You felt something when you touched him, didn't you?" Moiraira asked without preamble. Layla nodded. "He moved. Just barely, but I felt it. And there was something else, like he was aware, trapped." "Yes," Moiraira breathed, eyes shining in the pre-dawn light. "Yes, that's exactly it. I've suspected for years, but no one dares speak of it. Amuntek is not in communion with the gods. He's imprisoned in his own flesh." "But how? Why?" "Kamet!" Moiraira spat the name like a curse. 10 years ago, when the pharaoh was preparing to announce his marriage to Princess Nefertiti of the Southern Kingdom, a union that would have diminished Kamet's influence, our beloved pharaoh suddenly fell into his divine trance. How convenient for the vizier. Layla's mind raced. "Are you saying Kamet poisoned the pharaoh?" "Worse. I believe he employed forbidden magic, the kind that separates soul from body, but keeps both alive. A living death." Moiraira clutched Layla's hands. "And now something about you has disturbed that spell. I saw how Kamet watched you at evening meal. He suspects something." "What should I do?" Layla asked, fear and something else, something that felt strangely like destiny, coursing through her veins. "Be careful, be vigilant, and perhaps," Moiraira hesitated, "perhaps find a reason to visit the Eastern Chamber again. The gods sent you here for a purpose, Layla. I'm certain of it." As the first rays of sun crested the horizon, bathing the palace in gold, neither woman noticed the small figure lurking in the shadows behind the granary, nor did they see him slip away, hurrying toward the vizier's private chambers with urgent news. In the eastern chamber, Pharaoh Amuntek lay as still as ever, but deep within, past the barriers of flesh and forbidden magic, something was stirring, something that had been dormant for a decade. A memory of amber eyes and a touch that felt like liberation, a name that whispered of hope, Layla. The weeks that followed her encounter with the sleeping pharaoh changed Layla in ways she couldn't quite explain. She found herself drawn to corners of the palace where shadows lingered, where ancient stones whispered secrets, if one only knew how to listen. The vast complex of Sutek, with its labyrinthine corridors and forgotten chambers, became both her obsession and her sanctuary. "You're playing a dangerous game, child," Moiraira cautioned one evening, as they sat in the small herb garden where they could speak without being overheard. The scent of rosemary and thyme masked their words from prying ears. "Kamet's spies are everywhere. I've noticed how you wander the halls when you should be at your duties." Layla plucked a sprig of mint, rolling it between her fingers. "I can't explain it, Moiraira. It's like something's calling to me, guiding me." The older woman's eyes crinkled with worry. "The gods work in mysterious ways, but so does Kamet. Just yesterday, Teti the guard captain disappeared without a word. They say he was asking questions about the night the pharaoh fell into his trance." A chill ran down Layla's spine despite the warm evening air, all the more reason to find answers quickly. That night, after the palace settled into slumber, Layla slipped from her pallet. The full moon cast silver pathways across the stone floors as she made her way toward the great hall. 3 nights ago, she discovered that one of the massive pillars there, carved with images of Thoth, god of wisdom, sounded hollow when tapped in just the right spot. The great hall stood empty and cavernous, moonlight streaming through high windows. Layla counted 5 pillars from the eastern entrance and ran her fingers over the carved ibis that was Thoth's sacred symbol. There, a slight depression beneath the bird's eye. She pressed, holding her breath. With a whisper of stone against stone, a section of the pillar slid inward, revealing a narrow passage. "By all the gods," she breathed, peering into the darkness. Using a small oil lamp she'd brought concealed beneath her shawl, Layla stepped into the passage. The air was cool and dry, untouched by time. The walls were covered not with the formal hieroglyphs of the main palace, but with older, more fluid symbols. Pressing onward, she descended a tight spiral staircase that seemed to burrow deep into the earth beneath the palace. The passageway eventually opened into a small chamber. Unlike the opulence of the upper palace, this room was Spartan. A simple stone table dominated the center, surrounded by shelves carved directly into the rock walls. Upon these shelves sat jars, scrolls, and strange instruments Layla couldn't identify. A scribe's chamber, she murmured to herself, remembering stories her grandmother had told of secret places where the kingdom's most sensitive records were kept. Setting her lamp on the table, she carefully examined a scroll that lay open, weighted down by small carved cats of obsidian. The papyrus was yellowed with age, but the ink remained clear. The hieroglyphs were in an archaic style, but Layla, who had learned basic reading from her father, a village record keeper, could make out some words. Preservation, vessel, car. She traced the symbols with a finger. These were instructions for some kind of ritual. A sound, faint but distinct, made her freeze. Footsteps, far above, but descending. Someone else knew of this passage. Quickly, Layla snuffed her lamp and pressed herself into the darkest corner of the chamber. The footsteps grew louder, accompanied now by the glow of approaching lamplight. "I tell you, something disturbed the wards," a woman's voice hissed. Layla recognized it immediately. Neferet, the high priestess who served as Kamet's most trusted advisor. "The pharaoh's car stirs. After 10 years of perfect containment, something has weakened the bindings." "Impossible," came Kamet's unmistakable reply. "The spell is perfect. No one in Aruzen has the power to break it." Yet his life force flickered. "I felt it. And the sacred scarabs in his chamber, they've begun to move again after years of stillness." The pair entered the chamber, their lamp illuminating their faces from below, transforming them into grotesque masks. Kamet's thin face was pinched with worry, while Neferet's coal-lined eyes darted around suspiciously. "Could it be the new girl?" Kamet asked. "The one from the desert village?" Layla's heart nearly stopped. Neferet scoffed. "A serving wench? What power could she possibly possess?" She was in his chamber when the wards first wavered, and there's something about her. Kamet's voice trailed off. "Have her watched closely. And if she is somehow interfering?" The vizier's smile was cold in the lamplight. "Then she will join the others who have hindered our plans." They moved deeper into the chamber, to a section Layla couldn't see from her hiding place. The clink of jars and rustle of papyrus suggested they were gathering materials. "The full moon is in 3 days, Neferet said. "We must strengthen the binding spell before then. If Amuntek were to wake and reveal what we did—" "He won't wake," Kamet snapped. "But yes, we will renew the spell. Prepare the sacred oils and the powder of crushed lapis. I'll bring his royal seal. And the blood. I'll handle that as well." Their voices faded as they gathered what they needed and ascended the staircase. Layla remained frozen in her corner, scarcely daring to breathe until long after their footsteps had disappeared. When at last she felt safe enough to move, she relit her lamp with shaking hands. What she had just overheard confirmed everything Miraira had suspected, and worse. Kamet and Neferet had somehow trapped Pharaoh Amuntek's spirit, his Ka, through forbidden magic. And in 3 days under the full moon, they planned to strengthen their evil spell, unless Layla could stop them. Drawn by an urgency she couldn't explain, she explored deeper into the chamber, to the area where Kamet and Neferet had gathered their materials. More shelves, more mysterious containers. But on a small altar against the far wall sat something that made her gasp. A perfect miniature replica of Pharaoh Amuntek, carved in dark wood. Thin golden wires wrapped around its limbs, binding it, and driven into its heart was a sliver of obsidian. A vessel, not just for the pharaoh's car, but for his very will. With trembling fingers, Layla reached for the figurine. The moment her skin touched the wood, a jolt of energy, like the one she'd felt when touching the pharaoh, coursed through her. But this time, instead of just sensation, she heard a voice, clear as still water in her mind. "Help me." She nearly dropped the figurine in shock, but something compelled her to hold tight, to listen. "Layla, find me beneath the lotus. The truth lies there." As suddenly as it had come, the voice faded. The figurine grew cold in her hands. Confused but determined, Layla carefully replaced it exactly as she had found it. If Kamet discovered it had been disturbed, all would be lost. Dawn was approaching as Layla made her way back through the secret passage and to her quarters. Her mind raced with questions. What did the voice mean by beneath the lotus? And how had the pharaoh known her name? The answer came to her as she laid down on her pallet, exhaustion finally overtaking her. The Lotus Pool, a small secluded courtyard on the west side of the palace, where blue water lilies bloomed year-round thanks to an underground spring. It was said to be one of Amenhotep's favorite retreats before his imprisonment. Sleep claimed her before she could consider further, but her dreams were filled with golden light, rushing water, and a voice calling her name with increasing urgency. Tomorrow, she decided, as consciousness slipped away. Tomorrow she would find what lay beneath the lotus. What she didn't see was Moiraira watching her from across the servants' quarters, a mixture of hope and terror etched on the older woman's face. Nor did she notice the small amulet Moiraira slipped beneath her pallet, an ancient protection against dark magic, handed down through generations of her family. "May Isis guide your steps," Moiraira whispered, "for all our sakes." Outside, the rising sun painted the palace walls blood red, and high above a falcon circled, its cry piercing the morning silence like an omen. The Lotus Pool lay deserted in the hazy light of mid-morning. Most servants were occupied with their daily duties, and nobles rarely ventured to this forgotten corner of the palace grounds. Perfect, Layla thought, as she slipped through the columned entrance, a basket of linens providing her excuse should anyone question her presence. The pool itself was small but exquisitely designed, with low stone benches surrounding crystal-clear water. Blue lotus flowers floated on the surface, their delicate petals open to the sun. Papyrus reeds grew in clusters at one end, providing shade and privacy. The entire courtyard was enclosed by high walls, covered in faded murals, depicting the pharaoh communing with the gods. "Beneath the lotus," Layla murmured, setting down her basket and approaching the pool's edge. Did the voice mean literally under the floating flowers, or was it a metaphor for something else? She knelt by the water, studying the pool's design. The bottom was lined with painted tiles forming an intricate mosaic of, what else, lotus blossoms. But one section, partially hidden beneath the shadow of the papyrus, seemed different. The pattern there was interrupted by what appeared to be a large, central lotus with a golden center. Taking a deep breath, Layla removed her sandals and outer tunic, leaving only her simple linen shift. She slipped into the cool water, careful not to disturb the floating flowers. The pool was deeper than it appeared, reaching to her shoulders as she waded toward the unusual mosaic. Beneath the water, she examined the golden center of the lotus design. It wasn't a painted tile at all, but a metal disc embedded in the stone. Holding her breath, she dove beneath the surface and pressed her palm against it. The disc gave way with surprising ease, rotating counterclockwise. There was a grinding sound muffled by the water, and a section of the pool's bottom slid aside, revealing a dark opening large enough for a person to slip through. Surfacing for air, Layla glanced around the courtyard to ensure she remained alone. Then, taking the deepest breath she could manage, she dove again and swam into the opening. The underwater passage was short, angling upward after just a few strokes. Layla broke the surface in a small, air-filled chamber, gasping. The space was dimly lit by thin shafts of sunlight, filtering through tiny openings in the ceiling, cleverly disguised, she guessed, as decorative elements in the courtyard above. Pulling herself out of the water onto a stone ledge, she found herself in what appeared to be a private study. Shelves lined the walls, filled not with the usual religious texts, but with scrolls bearing simple identifying marks. A writing desk occupied one corner, its surface dusty but otherwise neat, quills and ink cakes still arranged, as if their owner had just stepped away for a moment. "Pharaoh's personal chamber," she whispered in awe. This must have been where Amenhotep retreated to think and write, away from the constant scrutiny of court life. Drawn by an instinct she couldn't name, Layla approached a particular shelf where one scroll sat slightly apart from the others. Unlike the papyrus scrolls, this one was made of thin leather, dyed deep blue and sealed with golden cord. Her hands trembled as she carefully untied the bindings. The script inside was flowing and personal, not the formal hieroglyphs of official documents, but the hieratic script used for private writings. And more shocking still, the text was dated just 3 days before Pharaoh Amenhotep's reported descent into his divine trance. "I write these words in haste and fear," the text began. "Something is amiss within my court. Twice now I have found evidence of tampering with my food. The wine last night carried a bitter aftertaste, and within an hour my limbs grew heavy, my thoughts slow. Were it not for my years of building tolerance to poisons, a sad necessity for any ruler, I might already be journeying to the field of reeds. Layla's heart pounded as she continued reading. Kemet urges me daily to reconsider my marriage to Nefertiti. Last evening, he went so far as to suggest the gods themselves oppose the union. When I reminded him that interpreting divine will is the role of the priests, not the vizier, I saw something dark flash in his eyes, a look I have seen before in men who value power above all else. More concerning still, I have discovered that Kemet has been meeting secretly with Neferet, high priestess of Sekhmet. Together they have accessed the forbidden texts from the Old Kingdom, scrolls containing rituals so dangerous they were sealed away by my grandfather's grandfather. What magic they seek, I cannot say, but I have ordered the royal guard to search their quarters tomorrow. If anything should happen to me before then, let it be known that I, Amenhotep, Pharaoh of Upper and Lower Aruzen, of sound mind and body, believe Vizier Kemet and High Priestess Neferet to be engaged in treason against the throne and sacrilege against the gods. The final paragraph made Layla's blood run cold. I have taken precautions. Within the sacred vault of Thoth's temple, I have placed a sealed document naming my successor should I die without heir. And I have entrusted a copy to my most loyal servant Senbi, with instructions to deliver it to the general of the army should I fall ill or silent for more than 3 days. May the gods protect us all from what I fear is coming. Layla carefully re-rolled the scroll, her mind racing. This was the proof they needed, written in the pharaoh's own hand, that Kemet had indeed poisoned him. But if Amenhotep had left instructions with his servant Senbi, why had they never come to light? What had happened to the loyal servant and the succession document? A second scroll, smaller and more weathered, caught her eye. It bore the seal of the Temple of Thoth, broken long ago. Inside was a detailed account of an ancient ritual called the imprisonment of Ka, a forbidden spell that separated a person's life essence from their conscious will, trapping them in a state of living death. The victim would appear to be in a deep sleep or trance, completely aware but unable to move or speak. By the mercy of Isis, Layla breathed, her worst fears confirmed. This wasn't just poisoning, it was the darkest of magics. The ritual required 3 components: a physical anchor for the victim's K, like the wooden figurine she'd found, a binding agent made from the victim's blood mixed with crushed lapis and sacred oils, and, most horrifying of all, a living sacrifice whose life force would power the spell. The marginalia written in a different hand noted, Subject S provided adequate power for initial binding. Renewal requires fresh sacrifice every 10 lunar cycles. S. Senbi, the loyal servant who had never delivered his master's final orders. Fighting nausea, Layla read on. The ritual could be broken in only 2 ways, by destroying the physical anchor while reciting a complex counterspell, or by a person with a K of pure resonance touching the victim while speaking their true name. What was a K of pure resonance? The text didn't explain. The sound of voices above, too close for comfort, startled her from her reading. Quickly, she replaced the scrolls exactly as she had found them, then slipped back into the water. As she swam through the underwater passage, she heard the distinct sound of the stone disc rotating closed behind her, the chamber's final protection against discovery. Breaking the surface in the lotus pool, Layla found herself face to face with Kemet himself, standing at the water's edge. "Enjoying a private swim, girl?" he asked, his voice silky with suspicion. Layla forced her expression into one of embarrassment. "Forgive me, Great Vizier. The day is hot and I thought, that is, I didn't think anyone would mind if you what? Bathed in the pharaoh's private pool?" His eyes narrowed. "Come out of there at once." Heart hammering, Layla climbed from the pool, water streaming from her simple shift which now clung to her body. She kept her eyes downcast, the perfect image of a servant caught in a minor transgression. "What's your name, girl?" Kemet demanded. "Layla, Great Vizier, I serve in the Eastern Wing." "Ah, yes, the one who dropped the water pitcher in His Majesty's chamber." He circled her slowly, like a crocodile sizing up its prey. "You seem to have a habit of being where you shouldn't be. I meant no disrespect, Great Vizier. I only—" Silence. His voice was soft, but carried the weight of absolute authority. "Listen carefully, Desert Girl. The palace has rules, traditions, hierarchies. Those who forget their place often find themselves removed from it, permanently." He leaned closer, his breath hot against her ear. "Whatever you think you know, whatever you think you're doing, stop, now, or I promise you, They'll never even find enough of you to bury." With that, he straightened and smiled pleasantly, as if they'd been discussing the weather. "Finish your duties for the day, and stay away from the eastern wing and this pool henceforth." Layla bowed deeply, fighting to control her trembling. "Yes, Great Vizier." As Kamet walked away, she gathered her basket and outer tunic, forcing herself to move slowly, naturally. Inside, her mind was chaos. The texts had confirmed everything. Amuntek had been imprisoned in his own body through forbidden magic, powered by human sacrifice. Kamet suspected her interest, but didn't yet seem to know how much she'd discovered. And the renewal ritual was to take place in just 2 days, under the full moon. She needed to find Moiraira, to tell her what she'd learned. Together, perhaps they could locate the wooden figurine that anchored the spell and destroy it before another innocent soul was sacrificed to maintain Kamet's power. As she hurried across the courtyard, the wet lotus petals clinging to her feet left a trail of delicate footprints that dried and disappeared in the hot sun, much like the truth of what had happened to Pharaoh Amuntek, erased by time and fear. But not for much longer, Layla vowed, not if she could help it. High above, watching from a window overlooking the lotus pool, Nefere's painted lips curved into a calculating smile. The palace of Sutek had not always been a place of whispers and sideways glances. In the early years of Amuntek's reign, laughter had echoed through its halls. Music had flowed from the great reception chambers. The pharaoh himself had been known to walk among his people, accessible in a way that had endeared him to nobles and servants alike. They had happened so gradually that most didn't notice, Moiraira explained as she and Layla sat grinding herbs in the medicine room, their hushed conversation masked by the rhythmic scrape of pestle against mortar. First came the security measures, guards posted at every doorway, servants forbidden from certain areas, then the informants. Layla crushed a dried mint leaf between her fingers, releasing its sharp scent. Informants? Kamet's eyes and ears. Some are paid well for their betrayals. Others serve out of fear. Moiraira glanced toward the doorway where 2 young boys were sweeping the corridor. Even the children are not exempt. Those 2? Sons of the kitchen master. They report directly to Neferet each evening. Who spoke to whom? Who lingered too long in conversation? Who mentioned the pharaoh's name with too much emotion? How can people live this way? Layla whispered, appalled. Moiraira's weathered face creased with sad understanding. When the choice is between comfortable servitude and painful death, most choose to live. After the first few examples, the palace learned quickly. Examples? The chamberlain, who questioned why no one was allowed to speak directly to Amuntek anymore, found floating in the Nile with his tongue cut out. The scribe who tried to send messages to the pharaoh's former military general disappeared along with his entire family. Moiraira's voice dropped even lower. And Senbi, the pharaoh's most trusted servant. They say Kamet had him flayed alive, while Neferet performed some dark ritual with his blood. Layla felt sick. The marginalia on the temple scroll flashed in her mind. Subject S provided adequate power for initial binding. But surely someone outside the palace knows something is wrong. The people are told that their pharaoh communes with the gods for their benefit, Moiraira interrupted. That his divine trance is bringing prosperity and protection to Aruzen, and there has been peace these 10 years. Kamet made certain of that, negotiating treaties, sending gifts to potential enemies. To question the official story is to question the gods themselves. And the nobles, the army. The nobles who showed any loyalty to Amuntek were gradually removed from power, their lands redistributed, their influence diminished. As for the army, Moiraira sighed heavily. General Seket was Amuntek's closest friend. When the pharaoh fell into his trance, Seket demanded to see him. 3 days later, he was sent to the southern border to quell a rebellion. He never returned. Assassinated? Presumably, though no body was ever found. Moiraira dumped the crushed herbs into a clay bowl. Kamet is thorough, you must understand. Over 10 years, he has woven a web of intimidation, bribery, and fear so complete that most people inside these walls can no longer imagine life without it. It's not just inside these walls, came a voice from the doorway. Both women startled. A tall young man stood there, his shaved head and simple white kilt marking him as one of the scribes who worked in the record-keeping chamber. Hori, Moiraira hissed. You shouldn't be here. The young man slipped into the room, closing the door behind him. And you shouldn't be discussing treason where anyone might hear. His tone held no accusation, only concern. The herb room isn't as safe as you think. Neferet's little spies report on which servants meet here too often. Layla tensed, ready to flee, but Marira laid a calming hand on her arm. Hori is one of us. His father served as court astronomer under Amuntek before Kamet had him pensioned off to a distant estate. The young scribe bowed slightly to Layla. Marira said you might be sympathetic to certain truths. What did you mean about it not being just inside these walls? Layla asked. Hori's dark eyes flickered to the door before he spoke. Kamet's network extends far beyond the palace. In every district of the city, in every outlying village, there are those who report to him. Tax collectors, magistrates, even temple priests. Many have been replaced with his supporters. But that would take years to accomplish, Layla objected. He's had 10, Hori reminded her grimly, and he was patient, methodical. Each position filled as its former occupant retired or met with misfortune. What about the sacred temples? Marira asked. Surely the high priests of Amun-Ra or Thoth wouldn't bow to him. The high priest of Amun-Ra died 3 years ago. Food poisoning, they said. His successor is Neferet's cousin. Hori's mouth twisted. As for Thoth's temple, it was mysteriously destroyed by fire not long after Amuntek fell ill. Many sacred texts were lost, or so the official record states. Relocated to Kamet's secret chamber, more likely, Layla murmured, thinking of the scrolls she'd discovered. Hori's eyes widened. You've seen it, the hidden archive. Layla hesitated, but Marira nodded encouragingly. If we can't trust Hori, we can trust no one. Quickly, Layla recounted what she'd found in both hidden chambers, the wooden figurine, the pharaoh's private journal, and the temple scroll describing the forbidden ritual. Hori listened intently, his expression growing darker with each revelation. This confirms what my father suspected, though he never found proof. But if what you say is true, Layla, we have very little time. The 10-year renewal of such a powerful spell will require a sacrifice, Marira finished, her voice hollow. Not just any sacrifice, Hori said. For a binding of this magnitude, it would need to be someone powerful, someone with a strong ka. A chill ran through Layla, like a scribe with royal blood. Hori's smile was bitter. My father was second cousin to Amuntek's mother. A distant connection, but yes, it flows in my veins. Perhaps that's why I was promoted to the palace records chamber last month, after years of working in the outer city. We need to get you away from here, Marira insisted. Tonight. If I run, they'll only find someone else, Hori argued, and my family would pay the price. No, we must stop the ritual itself. He turned to Layla. You said there are 2 ways to break the spell. Destroying the anchor while reciting the counterspell, or a person with a K of pure resonance touching the pharaoh while speaking his true name, Layla finished. But I don't know what that means. I might, Marira said slowly. In the old stories, a K of pure resonance refers to a soul that naturally harmonizes with another, like a string that vibrates in sympathy when its twin is plucked. Such connections are rare and unpredictable. Her gaze settled on Layla thoughtfully. You felt something when you touched the pharaoh, and again when you touched the figurine. You think Layla couldn't finish the thought. It seemed so impossible. I think nothing is coincidence, Marira said firmly. Why were you of all people assigned to the Eastern Wing? Why did you feel drawn to the secret passages? The gods work through us in ways we cannot always understand. Their conversation was interrupted by the distant sound of the bronze gong that signaled the changing of the guard, and with it, the rotation of servants to their afternoon duties. We must separate, Hori said urgently. Kamet watches for patterns, for people meeting too frequently. He reached into his robe and pulled out a small papyrus scroll. Take this. It contains the counterspell for the ritual, translated from an ancient text in the record chamber. I've been working on it in secret for months, never knowing if it would be needed. Layla accepted the scroll, tucking it into her waistband. How will we coordinate? The festival of Hathor begins tomorrow, Marira said. The entire palace will be in chaos with preparations. It's our best chance to move freely. She looked from Layla to Hori and back again. Meet at the old granary at sunset. We'll make our final plans then. As they prepared to leave, Hori caught Layla's arm. Be careful. Kamet doesn't just watch for actions. He watches for changes. In routine, in demeanor, in friendships. Anything unusual draws his attention. I'll remember, Layla promised. The afternoon passed in a haze of mundane duties, washing linens, carrying water, polishing bronze mirrors, but Layla's mind was elsewhere, rehearsing the counterspell Hori had provided, planning routes to the hidden chamber where the figurine was kept. So preoccupied was she that she nearly collided with Nima, the head of palace servants, as she rounded a corner. "Watch yourself, girl," Nima snapped, steadying the jar of oil she carried. Then, noticing who it was, her expression shifted to something more calculating. "Ah, Layla, just the person I was looking for." "Me, mistress?" "Yes, there's to be a special ceremony tomorrow night, a private ritual to honor the pharaoh's decade of divine communion. Vizier Kamet has specifically requested your presence." My presence?" Layla stammered, genuine fear making her voice shake. "Why would the vizier ask for me?" Nima's smile didn't reach her eyes. "He was most impressed by your dedication, said you showed unusual interest in the pharaoh's well-being. It's quite an honor, girl, one many would envy." "Of course," Layla managed to say. "Thank you for informing me. The eastern antechamber just after moonrise. Wear your best tunic. And Layla?" Nima leaned closer. "Don't be late. The vizier does not tolerate tardiness or absence." As the older woman walked away, Layla leaned against the cool stone wall, fighting a wave of dizziness. The meaning was clear. She hadn't been as careful as she thought. Kamit knew, or at least suspected, her interest in the pharaoh's condition. And now she had been summoned to what could only be the renewal ritual itself. But was she to be a witness, or the sacrifice? She needed to find Moiraira and Hori immediately. Their careful plans for tomorrow night had just become desperately urgent. The trap was closing, and Layla, with her strange connection to the sleeping pharaoh, was now at its center. In his private chamber, Kamet stood over a shallow basin of water, watching as Nima's conversation with Layla rippled across its surface, magic far older than the spell that held a Moon-Tech prisoner. Beside him, Neferet smiled, her fingers tracing patterns in the air that made the water vision shimmer and clarify. "You see?" the priestess said softly. "The fear in her eyes? She knows something. But how much?" Kamet mused. "And more importantly, who else knows it with her? Does it matter? Tomorrow night her K will feed our spell for another decade. Any secrets she holds will die with her." Kamet wasn't so certain. 10 years of vigilance had taught him never to underestimate even the smallest threat. This serving girl, with her strange affinity for the pharaoh, made his carefully cultivated instincts scream with warning. "Have Nima watched," he ordered, "and the old woman from the scribe's chamber, Moiraira. Something tells me our little desert flower doesn't act alone." Neferet bowed her head in acknowledgement, but her eyes gleamed with anticipation. "As you wish. But either way, by this time tomorrow, Amun-Tek's prison will be secured for another decade, and you, my lord, will continue to rule Aruzen in all but name." "All but name," Kamet repeated softly, his gaze drifting to the water basin where Layla's frightened face still rippled. "For now." Layla found Moiraira and Hori in the nearly deserted temple storage room, their worried faces illuminated by a single oil lamp. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in violent shades of crimson and gold. "It has to be tonight," she told them breathlessly, after relaying Nima's message. "Kamet has summoned me to the ritual tomorrow. If we wait, you'll be the sacrifice," Hori finished grimly. "Yes, it fits. The renewal ritual would be most powerful, with someone who has shown a connection to the imprisoned Ka." Moiraira's weathered face was drawn with concern. "But we're not prepared. We need time to—" "Time is the one thing we don't have," Layla interrupted, surprising herself with her forcefulness. 3 weeks ago she had been a timid village girl, grateful for a position scrubbing floors in the great palace. Now she stood between a sleeping pharaoh and his would-be murderers, planning what amounted to treason against the most powerful man in Aruzen. The weight of it should have crushed her. Instead, she felt strangely buoyant, as if guided by unseen hands. "I need to see him," she said. "The pharaoh. One more time before we attempt to break the spell." "It's too dangerous," Hori protested. "The eastern wing will be heavily guarded. If you're caught, I won't be." Layla's voice carried a certainty she couldn't explain. "And if we fail tonight, at least I'll have tried to reach him once more." Moiraira studied her face intently, then nodded. "I can create a diversion near the kitchens. It should draw some of the guards away for a short time. And I'll position myself in the record chamber," Hori added. "From there, I can see both the main corridor and the servants' passage to the royal apartments. If anyone approaches, I'll provide warning." They finalized their desperate plan, timing each element with precision. Moiraira would start a small controlled fire in the herb storage. Nothing dangerous, but enough to cause confusion. Hori would use his position as a scribe to misdirect any guards who remained. and Layla would slip into the pharaoh's chamber for one final attempt to break the spell by speaking his true name while touching him. If that failed, they would regroup at midnight to retrieve the wooden figurine from the hidden chamber beneath the Great Hall. As the first stars appeared in the deepening blue of evening, they parted ways, each carrying the weight of what was to come. "May the gods walk with you," Marira whispered, pressing something into Layla's palm, a small amulet of lapis lazuli, carved with the eye of Horus. For protection, Layla clutched it tightly, drawing comfort from its smooth coolness against her skin. "And with you." The diversion worked perfectly. The cry of "Fire in the kitchens" sent guards and servants rushing toward the eastern courtyard, leaving the corridors to the royal apartments eerily deserted. Keeping to the shadows, Layla made her way to the pharaoh's chamber, Hori's quiet whistle from the adjacent corridor signaling that the path remained clear. The massive cedar doors stood unguarded for the first time in Layla's memory. She slipped inside, closing them softly behind her. The chamber was different at night. Silver moonlight filtered through the high windows, casting long shadows across the obsidian platform where Pharaoh Amenhotep lay. The air was thick with incense and the herbal tonics used to sustain his unnatural sleep, the smell both sweet and somehow wrong, like flowers beginning to rot. Layla approached the platform slowly, her heart thundering so loudly she was certain it would betray her presence. Up close, Amenhotep looked younger than she had remembered, the harsh lines of authority softened by moonlight into a face that might have laughed easily once. "Your Majesty," she whispered, kneeling beside him, "I don't know if you can hear me, but I've learned the truth. About Kemet and Neferet, about what they did to you." No response, not even the flicker of eyelids she had seen before. Amenhotep remained perfectly still, his chest rising and falling in the shallow rhythm that had sustained him for a decade. Layla reached for his hand, remembering the shock of energy she had felt at their first touch. His skin was warm, surprising for someone so still, the nails neatly trimmed and painted with gold as befitted his station. His fingers were long, strong, a warrior's hands, despite their royal adornments. "I know about the ritual," she continued, her voice gaining strength. "The imprisonment of Ka. I know that you're trapped, conscious, but unable to move or speak." She squeezed his hand gently. "I found your journal, your warning about Kemet, and I think I might be able to help you." Still nothing. Doubt crept in, cold and insidious. What if she had imagined it all? The connection, the voice in her mind when she touched the figurine, the sense that she was meant to be here, in this moment. The scroll says a person with a K of pure resonance can break the spell by speaking your true name while touching you, she said, clinging to that last fragile hope. "I don't know if that's me. I don't know if I have whatever special quality that requires, but I have to try." Layla placed her other hand on his forehead, feeling the smooth warmth of his skin beneath her palm. Closing her eyes, she focused on the strange connection she had felt before, trying to reach past the barriers of flesh and forbidden magic to the trapped spirit within. "Amenhotep," she said clearly, "son of Netjeriket and Nithotep, lord of the two lands, guardian of the sacred flame, by your true name, I call you back to us." For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, like a distant storm rolling across the desert, she felt it, a tremor of energy building beneath her hands. The pharaoh's fingers twitched against hers, so slightly she might have imagined it if she hadn't been watching so intently. Encouraged, Layla leaned closer, her words taking on the cadence of ritual. "Amenhotep, your body is your own. Your will is your own. Your voice is your own. Return to us now, Great One. Return to your throne and your people." His eyelids fluttered, rapid movements beneath the delicate skin. His breathing quickened, becoming less shallow, more natural, and beneath her hand his fingers definitely moved, curling weakly around hers. "Yes," she breathed, feeling the power building between them, a current of energy flowing from her to him and back again. "Come back, Amenhotep. Break free of their spell. Reclaim your voice, your body, your throne." With a gasp that seemed to come from the depths of his soul, Pharaoh Amenhotep's eyes flew open. Dark, intelligent eyes, momentarily unfocused, then sharpening with awareness as they fixed on Layla's face. His lips parted, dry from years of disuse, and he struggled to form words. Layla quickly reached for the water pitcher beside his bed, helping him drink a few careful sips. "Who?" he rasped, his voice a broken shadow, of what it must once have been. "Who are you?" "My name is Layla, Your Majesty," she replied, joy and disbelief warring within her. "I'm a servant in your palace." He studied her face with an intensity that should have made her uncomfortable, but instead felt like recognition. "Layla," he repeated, the name sounding different in his royal mouth, imbued with significance beyond her understanding. "I know you. I heard you, calling to me, through the darkness." Before she could respond, the chamber doors burst open. Layla whirled, expecting guards, already calculating how she might protect the weakened pharaoh. Instead, Vizier Kamet stood framed in the doorway, Neferet at his side. Their faces, illuminated by the torch Kamet carried, registered identical expressions of shock and fury. "What have you done?" Kamet hissed, his composure cracking for the first time in Layla's memory. Neferet recovered more quickly, her painted lips curving into a terrible smile. "It seems our little desert rat has more talents than we suspected. How fortunate that we discovered her. Interference before the renewal ritual. The spell can still be salvaged." "Step away from the pharaoh," Kamet ordered, advancing into the room. "Now." Layla stood her ground, though her knees threatened to buckle with fear. "No, your spell is broken, Vizier. Pharaoh Amuntek is awake and aware. Your treachery is exposed." "Treachery?" Kamet's laugh was cold and calculating. "Is that what you call 10 years of peace and prosperity? 10 years of diplomatic triumphs and expanded territories? What has this young fool on the throne ever accomplished compared to my rule?" Behind her, Layla heard movement. Amuntek, struggling to sit up after a decade of immobility. She wished she could help him, but she didn't dare turn her back on Kamet and Neferet. "You poisoned him," she accused. "You performed forbidden magic to trap his car. You sacrificed innocent people to maintain your spell." "Necessary actions for the greater good," Neferet replied smoothly. "Amuntek would have weakened our kingdom with his talk of peace and equality. The royal line would have been diluted by his marriage to that foreign princess. Sometimes the gods require difficult choices from those who serve them." Kamet stepped closer, his hand moving to the dagger at his belt. "Enough talk. The girl dies now, before she can do any more damage. Then we strengthen the binding while the pharaoh's will is still weak." "Guards!" Layla shouted, hoping against hope that someone loyal might hear. "To the pharaoh's chamber. The king is awake." "Your desert voice won't carry far enough," Kamet sneered, drawing his dagger. "And even if it did, who would believe you over the Grand Vizier? Now step aside or die where you stand." "Neither," came a new voice, stronger than it had any right to be after years of silence. All eyes turned to the obsidian platform, where Pharaoh Amuntek now sat fully upright, his royal authority radiating from him despite his weakened state. "Kamet," he said, each word measured and clear despite the rasp in his voice, "you have betrayed your king and your oath. You have practiced forbidden magic and spilled innocent blood. For these crimes your life is forfeit." Kamet's face contorted with rage. "You are weak, Amuntek. Too weak to rule, too weak even to stand. I held this kingdom together while you slept. Everything you have, everything you are exists because I allowed it." "No," Amuntek replied, his gaze unwavering. "I live because of Layla, because somehow the gods led her to me through your web of lies and dark magic." With visible effort, he pushed himself to the edge of the platform. "And now I will reclaim what is mine." Neferet stepped forward, her hands weaving complex patterns in the air. "It's not too late," she insisted. "The binding can be re-established, stronger this time, permanent." "I think not," said yet another voice from the doorway. Layla nearly wept with relief as Moiraira and Hori entered the chamber, followed by a dozen palace guards whose faces registered shock and confusion at the sight of their awakened pharaoh. "What is the meaning of this?" demanded the captain of the guard, his gaze darting between Kamet and the clearly conscious Amuntek. "Treason," Hori answered clearly, holding up a scroll bearing the royal seal. "The attempted murder of Pharaoh Amuntek through forbidden magic, documented in the king's own hand." "Lies," Kamet snarled, but doubt had already crept into the guard's expressions. Neferet, seeing their position weakening, lunged toward Layla with a curved ceremonial knife that had been concealed in her robes. "If the vessel is destroyed, the spell ends forever." It happened in an instant, the flash of the blade, Layla stumbling backward, and Amuntek, with strength born of desperation, launching himself from the platform to intercept the blow. The knife meant for Layla's heart sliced across the pharaoh's arm instead, drawing royal blood that gleamed black in the moonlight. Chaos erupted. Guards rushed forward, seizing both Kamet and Neferet. Marira hurried to the pharaoh's side, applying pressure to his wound with practiced hands. And through it all, Amuntek never released his grip on Layla's hand, as if afraid she might disappear if he let go. "Secure them separately," he ordered the guards, his voice growing stronger with each word. "Post triple guards, no one speaks to them without my express permission." As Kamet and Neferet were dragged away, hurling threats and accusations, Amuntek turned to Layla, his dark eyes filled with wonder. 10 years, he murmured. "They stole 10 years from me, from my kingdom, but not more," Layla replied softly. "You're free now, Your Majesty." His hand tightened around hers. "Thanks to you." Then, seemingly remembering himself, he looked to the guards who remained. "Summon my council, all who held position before my illness, and send word throughout the city. Pharaoh Amuntek lives and rules again in Aruzen." As the guards rushed to obey, Amuntek swayed slightly, his extraordinary effort taking its toll on muscles unused for a decade. Layla and Marira moved to support him, helping him back to the edge of the platform where he could sit more comfortably. "You should rest, Your Majesty," Marira advised. "Your body has been through an unnatural ordeal." Amuntek shook his head stubbornly. "I've rested for 10 years, good woman. There is a kingdom to reclaim, justice to dispense." His gaze found Layla again, something unnamed but powerful in his eyes, and debts of gratitude to repay. Layla flushed under his scrutiny. "I did only what anyone would do." "No," he said simply. "You did what no one else could do, or would do." He reached up to touch her face, a gesture so unexpected and intimate that Layla froze. "You have a quality that called to me through the darkness, Layla of the desert, a purity of spirit that broke chains forged in the blackest magic." Before Layla could formulate a response to such extraordinary words from her king, the chamber filled with people, nobles, priests, scribes, all summoned by the miraculous news that their pharaoh had awakened. Their faces registered shock, joy, confusion, and in some cases barely concealed dismay, as decades of careful political positioning were suddenly rendered meaningless. Amid the growing tumult, as Amuntek began issuing commands and hearing the first reports of what had transpired during his long sleep, Layla tried to slip away, back to the shadows where a servant belonged. But his hand shot out, catching hers with surprising strength. "Stay," he said, the word simple but carrying the weight of royal command. And so she did, watching in wonder as Pharaoh Amuntek of Aruzen reclaimed his throne with the rising sun. In the eastern corridor, as dawn's first light spilled through high windows, palace servants whispered of impossible things. A desert girl with magic in her blood, a pharaoh risen from the brink of death, and the way he looked at her, not as a king to a servant, but as a man who had found something precious he feared to lose. "The days ahead will be interesting indeed," Marira murmured to Hori as they watched Layla standing beside the throne, her simple servant's dress incongruous among the finery of the court, yet somehow right where she was. "If we survive them," Hori replied grimly, thinking of the supporters Kamet had placed throughout the kingdom over 10 long years. "The vizier's web extends far beyond these walls." "True," Marira acknowledged. "But look at them, the pharaoh and the girl who woke him. Together they broke a spell crafted in the darkest magic, powered by blood sacrifice. Perhaps together they can break Kamet's hold on the kingdom as well." As if hearing her words, Amuntek glanced over at them, his eyes clear and determined, in a face still beautiful despite the decades stolen from it. Beside him, Layla stood straight and unafraid, transformed from the timid servant who had arrived at the palace gates just months before. "The God King and the Desert Girl," Hori mused. "Who would have thought?" "The gods work in mysterious ways," Marira replied, touching the amulet of Isis that hung at her throat, "and their plans are often greater than we can imagine." 3 days after Pharaoh Amuntek's miraculous awakening, the palace of Sutek simmered with tension. On the surface, celebrations continued. Feasts were prepared, musicians played in every courtyard, and citizens from throughout Aruzen made pilgrimages to catch a glimpse of their restored God King. Yet beneath the jubilation ran currents of fear, uncertainty, and scheming that threatened to undermine the fragile new order. "They're getting bolder," Marira observed, nodding toward a cluster of nobles hovering near the entrance to the throne room. "That's the 3rd delegation today." Layla followed her gaze. The men were richly dressed in the finest linens, their necks and wrists heavy with gold, but their expressions were anxious. "Who are they?" "Landowners from the eastern provinces. all appointed by Kemet within the last 5 years. Marira's mouth tightened. They're here to pledge loyalty to Amuntec, of course, and also to remind him how essential they are to the kingdom's prosperity. You mean they fear losing their positions, Layla said. With good reason. Already the pharaoh has removed 6 district governors and replaced 3 temple priests with men who served before his imprisonment. Marira lowered her voice. Many who prospered under Kemet now worry their fortunes may reverse. The past few days had been a whirlwind of changes and revelations. Kemet and Neferet remained imprisoned in separate quarters, heavily guarded and denied all visitors. Amuntec, though still physically weakened, had thrown himself into the work of reclaiming his kingdom with a fervor that alarmed his physicians. And Layla, to her continued astonishment, had been installed in private chambers near the royal apartments, assigned handmaidens, and given the official title of Advisor to the Living Horus, an unprecedented position for a common-born woman, let alone a servant. "The pharaoh asks for you," announced a royal herald, appearing so suddenly at Layla's side that she nearly jumped. "Now?" The herald bowed slightly. "The Great One awaits you in the scribe's chamber." Curious, Layla followed him through corridors that had become increasingly familiar. Where once she had slipped through these halls like a shadow, now she walked openly, her simple but elegant linen dress marking her new status. The transition felt surreal, a dream from which she half expected to awaken at any moment. She found Amuntec seated at a large cedar table covered with papyri, scrolls, and clay tablets. Hori stood at his side, pointing to specific documents as they spoke in low, urgent tones. Both men looked up as she entered. "Layla," Amuntec greeted her, his voice warm. Although still thin from his long confinement, color had returned to his face, and his eyes were clear and focused. "Thank you for coming so quickly." "Of course, Your Majesty." She bowed, still uncomfortable with the formality required in his official presence. In private moments, which had been surprisingly frequent these past days, he insisted she use his name, claiming he had heard it too rarely during his imprisonment. "Show her," he instructed Hori. The young scribe handed Layla a papyrus scroll bearing Kemet's distinctive seal. This was found hidden in a false compartment in the vizier's quarters. It's a list of names, every official, noble, and military leader in Aruzen, marked according to their loyalty. Layla scanned the document, her heart sinking as she grasped its implications. 3 columns of hieroglyphics, names, positions, and beside each, a simple symbol. A sun disk for those loyal to Amuntec, a crescent moon for those whose allegiance could be bought, and a jackal for those who served Kemet absolutely. The jackal column was by far the longest. "He replaced them all," she breathed. "Every important position in the kingdom." "Not all," Amuntec corrected grimly, "but enough." "Too many." Hori pointed to a notation at the bottom of the scroll. "This is worse. Instructions for immediate action in case of the pharaoh's awakening. Loyal military units positioned to secure the palace. Orders prepared for the immediate execution of potential opposition. Even provisions for the public story they would tell, that Amuntec had been possessed by an evil spirit and required permanent containment. They planned to kill me if the spell broke," Amuntec said matter-of-factly. "Only your unexpected intervention disrupted their timeline." Layla's blood ran cold at how close they had come to disaster. "What do we do now? We can't simply remove every official Kemet appointed," Hori said. "The administration of the kingdom would collapse, but leaving his loyalists in power would be asking for assassination." Amuntec finished. He rose, moving to a large map of Aruzen painted on the wall. "We need to identify those we can trust absolutely, those who can help us rebuild without triggering civil war." "Marira might know," Layla suggested. "She's been watching the palace dynamics for years." "A good start," Amuntec agreed, "but we need more. Someone who knew the kingdom before." His voice trailed off, the full weight of his lost decade momentarily overwhelming him. "What about General Sekhet?" Layla asked softly. Both men stared at her. "Marira mentioned he was your closest friend. She said he was sent to the southern border after you fell ill and never returned." "Presumed dead," Hori confirmed, like so many who questioned Kemet's authority. But Amuntec had gone very still, his eyes distant with memory. "Sekhet," he murmured. "Yes, if anyone could have survived Kemet's assassins, it would be him." He turned to Hori. "Send discreet messengers to the southern garrisons. Have them inquire about an old soldier who might have served under Sekhet. Someone who disappeared around the same time. You think he's alive?" Layla asked, hope kindling in her chest. After all this time, Sekhet was more than my general. He was like a brother to me, Amuntek replied, and he was clever, far cleverer than most realized. If he suspected treachery, he wouldn't have simply walked into an ambush. He would have created contingencies. A commotion outside the chamber interrupted their discussion. Raised voices, the clatter of weapons. Amuntek tensed, instinctively moving to place himself between Layla and the door. The royal guard captain burst in, his face grave. Forgive the intrusion, Great One. The High Priestess Neferet has escaped. What? Amuntek's voice cracked like thunder. How? Treachery, my king. The guards assigned to her chamber were found dead, their life force drained by some dark magic. And there's more. The captain hesitated, clearly reluctant to deliver more bad news. Speak, Amuntek commanded. The wooden figurine, the one used in the binding spell, it's missing from the evidence chamber. Layla gasped. Though the spell had been broken when Amuntek awakened, the figurine itself still contained powerful magic. In Neferet's hands, who knew what damage it might cause? Seal the palace, Amuntek ordered. No one enters or leaves without my personal authorization. Post triple guards at Kamet's cell, and bring the chief priest of Thoth to me immediately. We need magical protections. As the captain hurried to obey, Amuntek turned to Layla and Hori, his expression grave. This changes everything. Neferet, loose with her knowledge of the dark arts, poses a threat beyond mere political intrigue. Could she recast the spell? Layla asked hesitantly. The thought of Amuntek returned to that living death too terrible to contemplate. No, he assured her. The binding of Ka can only be performed during specific celestial alignments with extensive preparation. But she has other powers, equally dangerous. We should relocate you to a more secure chamber, Hori suggested. Somewhere unexpected, with limited access. But Amuntek shook his head. No more hiding, no more shadows. I am Pharaoh of Aruzen, and I will not cower while my kingdom hangs in the balance. His gaze softened as it fell on Layla. But you should be protected. You're a target now, perhaps the primary target. Neferet will know it was your connection to me that broke the spell. Before Layla could protest that she needed no special protection, another messenger arrived, bearing a small clay tablet. Found in the High Priestess's cell, Great One, the guard explained, presenting it to Amuntek. The pharaoh examined the tablet, his expression darkening as he read the hurriedly scratched hieroglyphs. It seems our problems multiply, he said grimly, handing the tablet to Hori. Neferet had advance warning of her opportunity to escape. Someone within the palace is still loyal to her, or to Kamet. Hori scanned the message, then passed it to Layla. It was brief but chilling. Moon rises on Jackal's night. The vessel waits in shadow's embrace. 3 guards succumb to lotus wine. Freedom comes with night's last hour. Meet where ancient kings sleep beneath burning sands. The Valley of Kings, Layla murmured, recognizing the reference to the royal necropolis some distance from the capital. She plans to meet someone there. Someone who arranged her escape, Amuntek agreed. Someone with access to the guard rotations and the evidence chamber. Someone still in this palace. The implications hung heavy in the air. Despite Kamet's imprisonment, despite Amuntek's return to power, the vizier's network remained active and deadly. We need those we can trust, Hori said urgently. A inner circle beyond Kamet's influence. And we need them quickly, Amuntek added. He turned to Layla. You said Moiraira has been watching the palace dynamics for years. Bring her here, and any others you believe might have remained loyal despite the risks. As Layla hurried to obey, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were still missing something important. Neferet's escape was too convenient, the message too explicitly clear in its meaning, almost as if, wait, she said, turning back. What if this is exactly what they want us to do? Focus on Neferet's escape while something else happens. Amuntek's eyes widened slightly. A diversion, he breathed. Clever, Layla, very clever. He turned to the guard captain. Increase security on Kamet immediately. And check on the sacred vault, the one beneath the temple of Sekhmet. Neferet served there before her elevation to High Priestess. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Moiraira arrived with 2 others she vouched for absolutely, an elderly temple keeper named Kagemni, who had served 3 pharaohs, and a middle-aged scribe called Iput, whose family's loyalty to the royal line stretched back 5 generations. Together they pored over Kamet's lists, identifying those who might be turned back to Amuntek's cause and those who would need to be removed from power immediately. Messengers were dispatched to loyal military commanders. Secret orders were prepared for the arrest of the most dangerous of Kemet's supporters. It was well past midnight when a guard burst into the chamber, his face ashen. "Great one," he gasped. "The vizier. He's gone." "What?" Amuntek rose so quickly he knocked over his chair. "The cell is empty. The guards, all 6 of them, are dead, but not like the others. These were killed by blade, not magic. A coordinated effort," Hori said grimly. Neferet's escape was indeed a diversion, drawing attention and resources while others freed Kemet. "Seal the city," Amuntek ordered. "Every gate, every dock. No one leaves Aruzen tonight." He turned to his hastily assembled council. "We move now. Activate all loyal forces. Arrest everyone on our priority list before word of Kemet's escape can reach them." As the others rushed to implement his commands, Amuntek pulled Layla aside. "Stay close to me," he murmured. "I fear the worst is yet to come." "Shouldn't I help Moiraira coordinate with the temple loyalists?" she asked, surprised. He shook his head. "Your safety is paramount, not just for personal reasons." A flash of emotion crossed his face, too quick to interpret. "You are the living symbol of my restoration. If Kemet's supporters were to capture or kill you, it would be a devastating blow to our cause." Before Layla could respond, a commotion erupted in the corridor outside. The doors flew open, and a palace guard staggered in, an arrow protruding from his shoulder. "Attackers in the east wing," he gasped. "Dozens of them, dressed as servants and guards." "So it begins," Amuntek said grimly. "The battle for Aruzen." He gripped Layla's hand. "Stay with me. Whatever happens, we face it together." As they hurried from the chamber, surrounded by loyal guards, Layla caught a glimpse through a high window of the city beyond the palace walls. Multiple fires blazed in the distance, their orange glow illuminating the night sky. The sound of fighting echoed from several directions within the palace itself. Kemet had planned well during his decade of rule. Even from his prison cell, even after the failure of his forbidden spell, he had maintained a network of loyalists ready to plunge the kingdom into chaos at his command. But he hadn't counted on Amuntek's return. Nor, Layla thought with sudden clarity, had he anticipated the strength of the connection that had formed between Pharaoh and the simple desert girl who had awakened him. As they raced through the corridors toward the secure command center beneath the palace, Layla felt something unexpected alongside her fear, a fierce determination that bordered on exhilaration. For the first time in her life, she was fighting for something larger than survival. Fighting alongside a man who, despite his divine status, trusted her counsel and valued her presence. "We'll prevail," she told Amuntek as they descended the narrow stairs. "Your people have waited 10 years for your return. They won't lose you again." He glanced back at her, firelight from the torches catching the gold flecks in his dark eyes. "No," he agreed softly. "They won't. We have too much left to accomplish, too much left to build, together." The word hung between them, weighted with meaning neither was ready to fully acknowledge. Then they were swept into the underground chamber, where Amuntek's hastily assembled war council awaited, and the moment passed, but not the promise it contained. High above the palace, perched on the golden capstone of the Temple of Ra, a figure shrouded in black watched the chaos unfold. Neferet raised a slender hand, tracing arcane symbols in the air that shimmered briefly before dissolving into the night. Beside her, a jackal howled, an unnatural sound that carried across the city like an omen. "The pieces move into position," she murmured. "The true game begins." In her other hand, she clutched the wooden figurine that had once imprisoned Amuntek's car. Though that specific spell was broken, the artifact retained other powers, darker powers, that were about to be unleashed. As dawn approached, painting the eastern horizon with the first hint of light, the battle for the soul of Aruzen raged on, and in the heart of the storm stood a pharaoh newly awakened from a decade of living death, and the unlikely desert girl whose touch had changed the course of a kingdom. Dawn revealed Aruzen's battle scars, smoke rising from districts where fighting had been fiercest. Inside the palace, an uneasy quiet settled after Kemet's infiltrators had been mostly captured or driven back, though at terrible cost. In the underground command center, Amuntek studied reports with Layla by his side. "Kemet's supporters still hold the northern quarter and river docks," the guard captain reported. "They're still in the city," Moiraira confirmed. Strange lights appeared in Sekhmet's temple at midnight. "It's time the people heard directly from their pharaoh," Amuntek declared, straightening despite his body's protest. In the magnificent hall of columns, Amuntec addressed the assembled court. For 10 years, I was imprisoned in silence, not by choice but by treachery. You were told I communed with gods. These were lies. Gasps echoed as he revealed Khamet and Neferet's crimes. I return not seeking vengeance but restoration, he continued, then turned to Layla. This woman risked everything to free me. Where others saw a sleeping ruler, she perceived the truth. It was Layla who broke the chains binding my car to living death. Suddenly the doors burst open. Attack! Gasped a wounded guard. The northern gate has fallen! Chaos erupted until Amuntec's voice cut through. Silence! The single word froze everyone. This is the moment that defines us, he declared. The battle was ferocious. Amuntec fought brilliantly while Neferet's dark magic created unnatural shadows and melting stone. When she cornered Layla with the wooden figurine that had imprisoned Amuntec, attempting to capture both their cars, Amuntec roared with all his pent-up fury. His voice, amplified by the hall's perfect acoustics, reverberated with such force that the figurine cracked in Neferet's hand. I am Amuntec, living Horus, he proclaimed, each syllable striking the columns and returning amplified. The walls themselves responded, recognizing their true master. Khamet's forces faltered and the figurine split completely, releasing a burst of energy that neutralized Neferet's magic. After securing the prisoners, Amuntec found Layla. Your voice, she said wonderingly. It was as if the very stones responded to you. They did, he smiled. And now, let's greet our people together. A month after Amuntec's victory, the palace hummed with renewed purpose. Khamet and Neferet awaited trial in magic-bound cells, while the kingdom slowly healed. In the royal gardens, Layla sat with Marira, watching servants prepare for tomorrow's ceremony. The nobles are still grumbling, Marira observed. They expected him to choose Princess Neferure from the north. He needs a political alliance, Layla agreed sadly. Yet he declares you saved him, Marira countered. The court whispers of nothing else. Later in the throne room, Amuntec welcomed foreign emissaries. Layla stood nearby, her new position as royal advisor still drawing curious glances. Princess Neferure sends congratulations, announced the northern ambassador, and renews her family's interest in a royal union. A weighted silence followed. Amuntec's gaze drifted to Layla. Tell Princess Neferure I'm honored, he replied carefully, but allegiances can be secured without marriage. That night, he found Layla in the library. You should reconsider, she said. The kingdom needs stability. The kingdom needs truth, he countered. 10 years of lies was enough. He took her hands, surprising them both. When I was imprisoned, it wasn't a princess who saw me. It was you, a servant with nothing to gain. How can I rule with anyone else at my side? But I'm just the heart that beats behind this throne, he finished. The only one who truly saw me. Dawn found Layla packing her few belongings. You cannot leave, Marira protested from the doorway. I must, Layla replied, folding a simple dress. The priests made their position clear. A commoner beside Pharaoh threatens the divine order. Since when do priests dictate to Pharaoh? Marira challenged. Layla sighed. They don't, but Amuntec needs their support. I won't be the reason his rule falters. In the stables, as she prepared a modest donkey for her journey home, a commotion erupted in the courtyard. Servants ran, guards stood at attention, and suddenly Amuntec himself appeared, still in his council robes. You would leave without saying goodbye? His voice held more hurt than anger. It's better this way, she whispered. A clean break. Better for whom? He stepped closer. Not for me. Your Majesty. Amuntec, he corrected. Just Amuntec to you, always. He took her hands. Do you know what I realized during those silent years? Titles mean nothing. Power means nothing. Connection, true connection, is everything. The kingdom needs me, he finished. The whole me, and I am not whole without you. Before the gathering crowd of servants and nobles, he declared, in a world of masks and pretense, you alone saw the truth. That is worth more than any royal bloodline. But the priests will adapt, he smiled, as will Aruzen. The great hall of justice overflowed with people from every level of society. Nobles in their finery, priests in ceremonial robes, and commoners granted unprecedented access to witness the trial of Khamet and Neferet. Amuntec sat upon the judgment seat, 42 assessors representing the nomes of Aruzen arrayed beside him. Before the dais stood the prisoners, bound with both physical chains and magical wards. "The evidence has been presented," Amuntek declared. "The testimonies heard. It is time for judgment." Kamet raised his head defiantly. "You cannot erase a decade of progress. The people prospered under my rule." "Some prospered," Amuntek acknowledged, "while others suffered in silence." A noble stepped forward. "Great one, tradition demands royal blood for royal blood. These traitors attempted regicide." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. "And what of their other crimes?" Amuntek asked. "The forbidden magic? The sacrifices of innocent lives? The corruption of our sacred traditions?" Silence fell as he rose from the judgment seat. "Today, I declare that true nobility exists not in bloodlines, but in actions." His gaze found Layla among the observers. A desert-born servant showed more royal spirit than 1,000 nobles when she risked everything for justice. He faced the prisoners again. "In that spirit, I choose mercy over vengeance, banishment over execution." When protests erupted, Amuntek raised his hand. "But never mistake mercy for weakness. Let it be known throughout Aruzen that the era of shadows has ended. The light returns." Layla stood beneath the starlit sky, wrapped in white linen embroidered with gold. Before her stretched the sacred lake, its surface shimmering with floating lotus blossoms and oil lamps that transformed the water into a field of stars. "Are you certain?" Moiraira asked, adjusting Layla's ceremonial collar. "Once done, this cannot be undone." "I've never been more certain," Layla answered, though her heart fluttered like a captured bird. Drums began their ancient rhythm as the royal procession approached. Amuntek walked the path alone, his golden regalia catching firelight, his eyes fixed only on her. Around them gathered the witnesses, nobles still struggling with this unprecedented elevation, priests who had finally conceded after consulting ancient texts about pure cause, and villagers from Layla's homeland, weeping with pride. From the dust of the desert came truth when falsehood had taken root, Amuntek proclaimed as they joined hands. From the lowest station came the highest courage. The high priest of Amun-Ra stepped forward with sacred oils. "The gods have spoken through signs and wonders. What was hidden has been revealed." As dawn kissed the horizon, they completed the ancient rites. Palace servants scattered lotus petals, while Kamet and Neferet departed for exile, their influence broken. "My queen," Amuntek whispered, no longer pharaoh to servant but husband to wife. "My heart," she answered, no longer desert girl but queen of Aruzen. 1 year after the wedding that had stunned Aruzen and forever altered its social fabric, Pharaoh Amuntek and Queen Layla stood on the royal barge as it glided along the sacred river. The annual blessing of the waters, traditionally performed at the first light of the summer solstice, had drawn thousands to the riverbanks. Farmers and fishermen, nobles and craftsmen, priests and scribes, all gathered to witness their rulers commune with the life-giving Nile. The past year had not been without challenges. 3 minor uprisings had been quelled in distant provinces where Kamet's influence had run deepest. Trade agreements with neighboring kingdoms had required delicate renegotiation, and within the palace itself, certain noble families still maintained a cold distance from the queen they considered beneath them. Yet for each obstacle, there had been twice as many triumphs. The agricultural reforms Amuntek had envisioned before his imprisonment had finally been implemented, bringing prosperity to regions long neglected. Schools of writing and medicine, open to qualified students regardless of birth, had been established in every major city. And most significantly, the old magic, the true magic of healing and wisdom, not the forbidden arts Neferet had practiced, was being carefully reclaimed under the guidance of a newly appointed council of priests and priestesses. "Look," Layla said softly, pointing to the eastern horizon where the first golden rays of Ra pierced the lingering darkness. "It begins." Amuntek squeezed her hand, his smile visible even in the dim pre-dawn light. "A new day. Again and again, the darkness yields." The royal couple, dressed in ceremonial white with matching gold circlets, moved to the forward deck where the ritual implements awaited them. Unlike previous pharaohs who had performed the blessing alone, Amuntek had insisted that Layla participate fully, her desert-born understanding of water's precious nature adding meaning to the ancient ceremony. From the shore came the rhythmic pulse of drums and the haunting melody of reed flutes. Incense smoke drifted across the water, carrying prayers upward to the awakening sky. Behind the royal couple stood their most trusted advisors, Moiraira, now chief archivist of the kingdom, Hori, elevated to royal scribe, and, most surprisingly to some, General Sekhet. The legendary military commander had indeed survived Kamet's assassination attempt a decade earlier, living in disguise among the desert tribes until a secret message from Amuntek had reached him. His return 6 months ago had solidified the pharaoh's hold on the army and brought much-needed stability to the kingdom's borders. "It is time," announced the high priest of Hapi, god of the annual flood. Together, Amuntek and Layla lifted the ceremonial vessel, a bowl of pure gold inlaid with lapis lazuli and carnelian. Inside lay water collected from the river's source far to the south, carried by runners across hundreds of miles to reach this moment. "Great Hapi," Amuntek intoned, his voice carrying across the hushed crowd. "Lord of the fish and birds, master of abundance, we honor your gift. Life-giver, land nourisher," Layla continued, her part in the ritual no longer shocking to most who watched. "We stand as witnesses to your generosity and guardians of your blessing." In perfect unison, they poured the sacred water back into the river, completing the circle that sustained all life in Aruzen. As the last drops fell, the sun crested the horizon fully, casting the river in molten gold and illuminating the royal couple in almost blinding radiance. A great cheer rose from the assembled crowd, thousands of voices merging into a single expression of joy and hope. Farmers knelt to scoop up the newly blessed water for their fields. Mothers dipped their children's feet in the sacred river. And everywhere, people turned to embrace one another, the ritual marking not just the promise of a good harvest, but the continued healing of a kingdom once fractured by darkness. As the ceremonial portion concluded and the royal barge began its slow return journey to the palace, Amuntek and Layla retreated to a small canopied section at the stern where they could speak privately. "You're quiet this morning," Layla observed, studying her husband's face. Though still young, the ordeal of his imprisonment and the challenges of reclaiming his throne had left their mark in the fine lines around his eyes and the occasional strands of silver in his dark hair. Yet to her, these signs only added to his beauty, evidence of survival, of endurance. "I was remembering," he admitted. "1 year ago today, after our wedding, we stood on the east terrace and watched the sun rise over the river. You asked me then if I thought we had truly defeated the darkness." She nodded, recalling the moment vividly. "And you said, 'That darkness is never truly defeated,'" he finished, "only held at bay by those willing to stand as guardians of the light." He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "I still believe that, but I no longer fear the darkness as I once did. Because of the reforms, the new protections, because of you," he said simply. "Because you showed me that light can come from the most unexpected places. That strength exists where traditional power would never think to look." Layla leaned against him, watching the shoreline pass by, the ordinary lives of her people unfolding in glimpses. Children playing, women washing clothes, men repairing fishing nets. Once she had been among them, indistinguishable from countless others who struggled daily for survival. Now, against all odds, she helped shape the destiny of a kingdom. "Have you told Marira?" Amuntek asked suddenly, his hand moving to rest lightly on her abdomen. Layla smiled. Of course, he had noticed the changes in her body, subtle though they were. "Not yet. I wanted us to have this time with just the knowledge between us." His expression transformed with wonder, the weight of kingship momentarily lifted. "A child," he breathed. "Our child. The physicians confirmed it yesterday," she said. "Her strong heartbeat," they said, "like a desert drum." Amuntek laughed, the sound so full of joy that several nearby attendants turned in surprise. The pharaoh was respected, even beloved by his people, but open displays of emotion were still rare from the man who had spent 10 years imprisoned in silence. "The council will be pleased," Layla continued. "They've been not so subtly asking about succession since our wedding night." "Let them wait a while longer," he replied, kissing her forehead. "This news belongs to us first, to our family." Family. The word still felt new to Layla, who had lost her parents to fever before coming to the palace. Yet here, against all probability, she had found not only purpose, but belonging. Marira had become like a mother, Hori like a brother, and Amuntek. "What are you thinking?" he asked, noting her contemplative expression. "About circles," she replied. "How life moves in great sweeping arcs that somehow bring us back to where we began, but changed." She gestured to the river, to the land beyond. "I was nothing when I came to the palace, just another pair of hands to carry water and scrub floors, and now you are everything," he finished. "To me, to our people, to the future of Aruzen." He placed his hand on her abdomen again, marveling. "And to this new life." As the royal barge approached the palace docks, the couple could see the grand preparations for the day's festival already underway. Pavilions had been erected in the public squares. Food and beer would be distributed freely to all who came to celebrate. Musicians and dancers were warming up for performances that would continue well into the night. But before rejoining the public ceremony, Amuntek led Layla to a quiet spot on the barge where they could watch the last of the morning mist burn away from the surface of the Nile. "I have something for you," he said, removing a small object wrapped in linen from a pouch at his belt. "I meant to wait until tonight, but," he shrugged, smiling, "it seems right to give it now, here, with just the river as witness." Layla unwrapped the gift carefully, gasping when she revealed a pendant carved from the rarest blue stone, not lapis or turquoise, but the precious gem found only in the farthest eastern mines. Set in gold and suspended on a chain of intricate links, it depicted not a god or royal symbol, but a simple lotus blossom opening to the sun. "It's beautiful," she breathed, running her finger over the exquisite craftsmanship. "Turn it over," he urged. On the reverse side, tiny hieroglyphs had been delicately inscribed around the edge. Layla read them aloud, her voice catching with emotion. "From darkness, light. From silence, truth. From humble sand, the most precious gem. Our story," Amuntek said softly, helping her fasten the pendant around her neck. "A reminder of where we began and how far we've come." Layla touched the stone, feeling its coolness against her skin, knowing it would warm with her body's heat, just as she had warmed Amuntek's imprisoned soul with her presence. "And where we're going," she added, thinking of the child growing within her, a child who would be born into a world vastly different from the one she had known, free from the corruption and fear that had defined Kamet's rule. Together, they turned to face the east, where the sun now rode high in a sky of perfect blue. The last wisps of mist had vanished from the river's surface, leaving it clear and bright, reflecting the light in countless dancing fragments. In that moment, with the grand sweep of Aruzen spread before them, its fields fertile, its people awakening to new possibilities, its future uncertain but full of promise, Amuntek and Layla stood not as pharaoh and queen, but simply as man and woman, bound by a love that had transcended every barrier society could erect. "Whatever comes," he said, "we face it together." "Together," she agreed, knowing it was both promise and prophecy. And as their barge completed its journey home, the warm desert wind seemed to whisper around them, carrying away the last remnants of a dark era while heralding the dawn of something new, something neither had dared to imagine possible in their darkest hours, yet now spread before them as vast and life-giving as the eternal Nile itself. From Layla's first encounter with the sleeping pharaoh to their final moment of triumph by the Nile, we've witnessed courage, sacrifice, and a love that transcended all boundaries. But the story doesn't end here. What happens next for Amuntek and Layla? Will their child grow to continue their legacy of justice and compassion? And what about the exiled Kamet and Neferet? Are their dark powers truly neutralized, or will they return to threaten the kingdom once more? I'd love to hear your thoughts. What was your favorite moment in the story? Did any character's journey particularly touch your heart? Perhaps you felt Marira's quiet strength, or Hori's scholarly courage. Or maybe you were moved by Amuntek's transformation from imprisoned god-king to compassionate ruler? Have you ever felt like Layla, underestimated by others but knowing deep inside that you had something valuable to contribute? Or like Amuntek, trapped in a situation where your voice couldn't be heard? The most powerful stories are those that live on in our conversations. Share your thoughts in the comments below. I respond to everyone personally. If this tale of courage and forbidden magic captivated you, you won't want to miss our previous story about the lighthouse keeper's daughter who discovered an ancient mermaid secret. The emotional journey in that one had readers reaching for tissues from start to finish. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Each one is crafted with the same attention to detail and emotional depth you've just experienced. Until our next adventure together, may your days be as bright as the dawn over the Nile, and may you always find the courage to speak truth even when surrounded by silence.